Hey there. Time to do another episode for the Barrie Colts franchise. It might be episode 30. This episode I was really excited to do because it's probably the most fun I've actually ever had playing this game. I'm enjoying every minute of it this season, especially just because of a multitude of different reasons. We got an amazing season, we put together a really good core, and the fact that it's just everything was built by me and I went slow and all the players are mine and all that, and the plan's kind of gone according to plan just makes it all the more worthwhile. It's the season that we have all the big three as the older fellas on the team. We got Bear, Kozlowski, and we talked about a bunch of times Brenneman. And right now they just won the World Juniors, as you saw in that email. So I just started the episode right away. As soon as I got that email, they beat the U.S. Brenneman was. There are actually only two centers named to the team. The guy who was the first pick of the draft last year from the Q, he's a monster. He's like 6'3", 225. And super high rated and everything. And then Brenneman were the only two centers named to the Team Canada roster. The rest were all wingers. So I guess it was a weak year on center. So him and that guy were both huge time players on that team, and they both were first and second line centers. Brenneman was second line center, but he was also the first line power play center over that guy. That guy was actually on the left point on the power play. Brenneman was a center. So Brenneman had a huge role, and he scored 2 goals in the championship game and a 5-3 win. It looks like I think that we beat the U.S. almost every season that we've won, which is really cool. If you look at the history, it shows of the World Junior Championships. It shows, yeah, we've won back-to-back years over the U.S., and then the U.S. beat us the year before that, and then we beat the U.S. the year before that, and the U.S. beat us the year before that. So it's 5 straight gold medal games, Canada-U.S., and we've come out victorious on 3 of them. The 2 that they won, they had, if you guys remember, they had that freakish combo of that 245 guy, Edmund Murphy, and then they had also the center and that right winger for the last one, who was only on one of them, I think, because then he made the NHL and wasn't named to the last 2, but O'Halloran or whatever. All those crazy forwards they had. They actually have another guy like that this year who was only 16 years old. I noticed on their roster. He was a center. It was Fowler, maybe? I think did he just turn? Yeah, he just turned 17 yesterday in the game. So he was 16, and so he's not even in the draft yet. But he's just a freak, and he's another one of those underage guys. But yeah, so Canada's roster was pretty nasty. We had the 3 guys on there. I'll talk about the third one in a minute. But Kozlowski was on there. He scored a bunch of goals, which is so cool. And then Brenneman. And Kozlowski was actually the team's leading scorer, which is really sweet. He had 4 goals and 8 assists. He was set to a perimeter scorer on the roster. They set that, which is pretty cool. So they actually figured he was one of the best scorers on the team. And then Brenneman had 5 goals, which was second on the team. He's finished with 7 points in 7 games and a +5 rating, 56% on faceoffs. He played a huge role. It was the Oshawa biggest rivalry I've ever had in this game is this Oshawa center. Him and Brenneman have just been going at it for like 4 years. Devine keeps making all the All-Star teams. He made the championship. He won the Red Tilson last year. And every single season, Brenneman's like right on the doorstep with the same stats. Like Brenneman had almost the same amount of points the last 2 years. In both years, Devine keeps winning all the awards. Devine's won like 6 Player of the Month awards, so Brenneman's won 0. And almost every single time Devine wins it, Brenneman had like the same amount of points that month. And when we matched up in the playoffs, friggin' Oshawa beat us. So unfortunately, Devine's really had Brenneman's number his whole career. So I'm really hoping this year that fortune's going to change. Devine's just a crazy player because he's such a crazy skater and defender. He's actually led the league in shorthand goals like 2 years in a row, and then he's also led the league in points. 122 last year is just insane. So Brenneman's pretty much at the same pace this year, 30 games, 59 points. If you look at Brenneman here, he's at 59 points in 30 games too. So they're just neck and neck, and it just seems like every single season they just have the exact same type of season, and it seems like Devine gets all the credit. And not to mention that Devine goes higher in the draft by like barely 2 picks. I think Brenneman was like early second round, and Devine was like the last pick of the first round. So it's pretty funny, kind of mini rivalry they've had. But the main thing I want to talk about this episode is I just made a massive, massive trade, and probably the biggest trade I've ever made in this game for top talent. We decided that we had the 4 second round picks and the 4 third round picks for the draft. We were going to do a full out rebuild, and I purposely traded away a bunch of picks in last year's draft to kind of clear out the system so we didn't have an overload of players around the same age. And I really want to stock up this season, get a bunch of high picks, and really build the team around. You can only draft 4 16-year-olds in the OHL, so I was going to draft them all this year and then the following year play them all 17-year-olds together for 2 or 3 years. But I decided with such a good team, and if you look at the standings, we were in first place and the best team in the league. We have a 67 game point differential and crazy away record if you look 16-4, and just such a good season so far that with it being Brenneman's last year, Kozlovsky and all those guys being older, 19, I decided it was time to go all in. And if Glodiv, if you look at our starting goalie, he was like a 10 rated, kind of a bunch of 8s in some important categories like glove and rebound, and has really high reflexes and had about an 89 save percentage, and that's kind of gone up lately. It was about 875. We had a couple of big games this week. But I decided to look around the league, and I looked, and Sault Ste. Marie was at 6 wins and 29 losses. I made the trade a couple days ago. And they just were far and away the last place team. So if I looked at their team, Howe was like a 3.5, 4-star as a 19-year-old. So in real life, there'd be absolutely no reason for him to play out the year. It'd be the most guaranteed trade time. It'd be like the DiPietro situation, which I kind of tried to mirror because in real life, Ottawa went to Windsor, who had a subpar year and got the best goalie in the league for about 4 future second-round picks. He was 19 also. And so that's just a half-year rental. He won't even play an overage season probably because he's too good. And he's an HL pick, so we'll probably move over to the ECHL or the AHL. So I decided that it was a ton to give up. And I was going to... The game's kind of broken with the trades, and it doesn't ever let you do trades, really. So I decided just to make it realistic and do the forced override because the game never really... I 5 first-round picks, and it would say no. It's just kind of crazy, so... I made it so I just gave up the same they gave up for DiPietro in real life, and I thought that'd be realistic because he's an elite 6'4", 230-pound goalie, and if you look at him, he's got like 13, 14 and everything, and he's just a freak. And he was the 5th pick of the draft in the OHL a couple years ago. He's an NHL draft pick. That kind of put it over the top for me, the fact that he was a Toronto Maple Leafs pick. So you get the hometown hero guy that's a goalie in the NHL for the massively popular in Barrie, Toronto Maple Leafs. That's 6'4", 233 in a 19-year-old season. And the coolest thing is he's never really had any success in Sault Ste. Marie. He's had, well, I guess he actually had some winning seasons there in a row, but he's just got an awful, awful team around him this year. And he had a couple of decent years, but if you look, his defense has always been terrible. The goals against average so high, 3.8 and stuff. So he's never really had a great team. Sault Ste. Marie hasn't made it very far in the playoffs this year, so I just thought everything just pointed towards it'd be super realistic to trade for him because in real life he would probably get about the same haul, about 4 second-round picks. So I decided I would pull the trigger on this trade, even though I really don't like giving up future assets. The Bill Belichick and me just doesn't ever like trading future draft picks, but I just thought it was too much. Like if you look at that advantage, right, we go from a 1.5 star to a 3.5 at the most important position, goalie in the playoffs. Like it's just with a team like this and the guys I've like built so many years around developing, like Brenneman, Kozlovsky, and those guys, it was just way too valuable, I think, not to make that trade. Like if you look what he brings in the playoffs, having Glodiv as the backup now, because that was the other thing, we had a really bad backup that like .865 save percentage. That was another 19-year-old, like a 10th round pick back in the day. So the fact that we still have, we're going to send Duquette back down to junior A, a really bad start. So we're going to make that trade. But yeah, if you look at it from all perspectives, just Howe is just too nasty. He also just won a gold medal with World Juniors. He was the starting. Oh, that's what I kind of forgot to mention. He was the starting goalie in net for the team that just won the World Juniors, and so he has that gold medal now. And just that would be exactly the DiPietro situation in real life. Like gets traded right after the World Juniors, comes back to his new team. So it's just all excitement from that end of things. If you just think about it, like we have an elite goalie, we have an elite first line. Our power play is just absolutely disgusting, and everything on this team, it just seems like we don't have a huge weakness anymore. Because net was, I wouldn't say a huge weakness, but it definitely was not anything close to a strength. The only thing that was like I kind of thought about was the fact that his save percentage was about the same as my goalies, but not really. Like Howe was at an 896 on a really bad team, which probably makes it worse. I had 465 of goals against with no defense in front of him. So if he had a decent team, that'd probably be higher. Plus, our starting goalies was it's 889 now, but it was like 875 like until like a week ago. So it was definitely was like a decent upgrade. But I just think Howe can easily have like a 9-10 with us. He's the talent. He's as good as the last goalie I won a championship with. Actually, if you look at our history here, he reminds me a lot of Silvos, who, gosh, that was a long time ago now. But if you look at Silvos, the same idea, 6'4", 240. He was also a 6th-round pick from what I remember, from the Vancouver Canucks, another Canadian team. And he had about, not quite that good back in the day. He's developed a little bit as a pro, but he was a guy that was like a 13, 14 rated 2 at the time. Pretty much the same minus those like 17, 16s. And so a lot of similarities between those two. If you look, he's making $435,000 a year, which is pretty good in the pro league there in Germany, I guess. Played 3 years in the ECHL, but yeah, if you look at him, he had a 902 and a 900 those 2 years, and he had 5 shutouts between the 2 years. And that Memorial Cup year, he's 34-4, and that was the guy. I think that's the same kind of player that Howe is. So I think that was the right move. I always second guess myself when it comes to trades because I just overthink it a little bit. I just love these dynasties and I just want to make the right move. And I know it's just a video game, but it's just fun to think about it super realistically sometimes. And the games are so good, these out of the park franchise hockey manager games, and it makes you definitely get emotionally involved in them more. Is just a lot of fun. So I think some of the trades I think about after the fact and stuff, but I just think the positives outweigh the negatives when it came to this trade. Howe is just such a beast. I'm just too excited to see what he brings to the table here this season. So now if you look at our team, right, you got Bear, Wall. I got to fix. Who do I put Kozlovsky in for Dennis? Let's see here. There we go. So yeah, if you look at our team now, we got a 19, 14, and 18 first line, 13, 15 defense. And then we got Brenneman in the second line with a 14 and a 12. And then we got all double-digit defensemen. We got a second line guys with 13. And then all 13 10s, pretty much the last 2 lines here. If you think about it, this team is pretty nasty. There's one more trade I was thinking about making. I went to the other last place team here, Erie. And I looked at their best player, and he's actually a 3-star. He's an 18-year-old that's a 15-rated agitator because he's got such crazy aggression. It's the highest fighting I've ever seen. The game never ever really makes players over 6 fighting. They always start at 4 and develop to 8 or 9. So the fact that he's got 14 is crazy. So he's a guy that can protect your whole team, play elite defense. He's a crazy hitter with hitting and checking at 14 with high strength and fighting. So he's just a guy that you'd really want in the playoffs in hockey. And he's so talented that he's also pretty top-notch OHL forward when it comes to the offensive side of things. And he's also back for another season, so he would be a 1.5-year player, and he would be elite next year. Almost good enough where I'd say he'd probably be a second-line guy because he's so talented, so good defensively, be an absolute shutdown guy in that second line. And I figured if I'm going to kind of reverse course and give up all the second-round picks, I didn't have to give up that many, though, because I had 4 this year because all those trades you made in the past. And then I had 2 the year after. And then you get the 1 for the 3rd year because it goes 3 years in the future. You can trade picks. So I just realized this guy's 24 years old. Every roster seems to have one guy like this. Game's broken. 15 years in the OHL. It's getting worse. Game ratings been in the 60s for 8 years. Oh, they got to fix that. They got to edit that out. So yeah, if you... yeah, if you think about it, that would be another. Might as well just keep going all in because we still have 4 second-round picks in the next 3 years. We still have 1 this year, I think I kept, and then 1 next year. I think we had 2 next year. I think we have 1 or 2 still left, and then we still have that 2029 pick also. So that's a pick where I think we could give up. And because in real life, teams, when they're going all in, they go all in. They give up all their second round picks for the next 5 years, and they just fully give up every asset they have. Because what's the point of coming up just short of a championship and thinking oh, if I would have made that last trade, I could have really upgraded a player. I could have taken this 9 overall and trade him. That was what I was going to do, is trade McLeod, pretty good 17-year-old who's going to be really good in a couple years, a 13, 14 rated. And I was going to upgrade him and a couple second-round picks to trade for that guy. You. And that would be definitely a really realistic trade. The team that's in last place, just downgrading by another winger, just 1 year younger, that's almost as good, and getting up multiple second round picks. That'd be a super realistic trade because they obviously would be pretty much given up on that year and probably wouldn't be very good the year after. If you're only a 9-win team in January, the odds are your talent's not going to be that good the next year either. So that would be a really good trade, I think, for both sides, just like the other one. But I don't know if it's really worth it. And he's their captain on top of that, so you're getting like an elite player, and you're upgrading from a fourth liner just for a couple second rounders. So I think that's another one of those things I could look back on and be like, if I had a 15 rated guy that I could put on the third line and have an elite defensive line, because Holmgren's really good defensively. So I could have like Miranda, Holmgren, and that defensive guy, and then move Zatkoff down. That would probably upgrade my team quite a bit, but at the same time, I don't know if upgrading a winger in the third or fourth line is worth giving up multiple second round picks. But at the same time, I would have him next year. So next year, he'd probably be like my probably best winger other than the two overagers, Barrie and Kozlowski, which I keep assuming are back next year, but I'm forgetting that they like, even though they haven't been drafted, I have had 19-year-olds drafted before, and they could be good enough to sign for the ECHL, even if they're undrafted, because their currents are so high. So it wouldn't shock me if they actually weren't back, and that guy could probably be a first-line winger next year with Zampero if those two guys were to leave. And then that guy would probably be a really good OA, actually, too, in a couple of years. So that's a trade I think I'll think about for another week or so. In the game, I moved the trade deadline from the 10th to the 20th for some reason. I just thought it would be cool to move it up. I think it feels a little bit too early after the break of the World Juniors. You only have like a day or two to decide, and I always kind of forgot about it, so I thought I'd move it up. I think I moved up to like the 20th in the game, so I got about 10 more days to think on that trade for Erie. I think I'll probably go through with it, even though I kind of really like McLeod. I drafted him in the third round, and he's just a really good defensive player for his age, and he has a couple of gold medals actually. They think really highly of him at Hockey Canada thinks highly of him, so I think he's another guy I don't really know if I want to give up, but I think having a 15 rated agitator is really clutch when it comes to playoff time. So if I can look back and think I added Howe and a 15 rated winger for the playoffs, I think giving up like 6 second round picks is quite a hefty price, but in real life, it's realistic. Teams do that kind of thing. Get a really good 18-year-old winger. I think 15 rated for 2 years would be worth probably. Even though McLeod's pretty solid, but he's also a guy that's probably just gonna be in the fourth line again next year because we just have so much depth at the wing. That's like we just called Dennis up, and we're gonna call him up till next year, but we had a bunch of guys at World Junior we had to replace, and just to fill out a roster. And Dennis is another really good guy. 13 defensive read. He has really good offensive ratings. Young 17-year-old, good skater. 11 and 12 speed and balance. So he's just another guy that could easily fill in for McLeod on that fourth line next year, kind of thing. So yeah, so one more trade we think about. I didn't see any others that really jumped out at me. The Eastern Conference is a really tight race, and so if you look at the last bottom 4 teams' records, 17-16, 17-16, or sorry, 17 in wins. So no, I don't think it's really realistic for anyone to really give up in real life because any one of those teams could easily jump into third place in the division with like 2 or 3 wins and all of a sudden be like a middle of the pack playoff team. So I didn't think it was realistic for anyone to quite give up. And that's another cool reason about moving the trade deadline a little bit later. It gives teams just a little bit more time to decide if they're in the race because Sudbury could lose 4 more in the next week and Niagara could win 2, and all of a sudden there's like a 5-game gap and Sudbury could easily give up on the year. By the way, I thought I'd show you guys the defenseman for Sudbury that went first overall last year. That was 6'8", if you remember him. He's still 6'8". He's grown to 236, and he's got pretty crazy elite stats now. His speed has gone up like crazy. It was like 10 or 11, and his strength's gone up a little bit, and his defense has really gone up. I think he was 10 in all the offenses of the draft, so he's really progressed in the year, and he's the guy that's probably going to be the first pick of the draft next year. He's a late birthday, so he's going to be third year in juniors at 6'8", 240, and go in the NHL draft after his third year, which anyone born after September 15th gets that. So that's pretty crazy. Never seen this guy before. He must have gone really high. Yeah, 7th in the import draft. That's pretty cool. So they have the 6'5", 240 guy and the 6'8", 240 guy paired together in the left and right side. That's so crazy. 17 years old each. Oh, that's nasty. That's a cool team. And then they also have this really elite 19-year-old. So the best players are like defensive players. That's pretty sick. And then they got a couple good older guys. See, like their best older 19-year-olds like wouldn't even be good enough to be on my fourth line. Really, that's how much depth I've built on this team. So it's when some of these teams don't even have too many guys they could trade for. I really like this guy. 3rd round pick. I must have missed him in the draft. That's a really nice offensive forward there. He's going to be a really good player the next 2 years for them. Probably be their number one center the next 2 years with that elite 17-year-old defensive pairing. Lagoose and Bartos in that center. I think next year will actually be pretty good. And because Sudbury's had a bunch of bad years in a row. Let's see here. Yeah, 24-40, 11-52, 38 wins that year, and then 24. So they've only had one playoff season in the last 5 years. Pretty hurting times in Sudbury. So it's cool to see them get a couple good young guys, hopefully, to build around. But you never know. It is only 3 players. There's still not that much talent in the system. 25 years old. Did this guy get signed back? I thought I edited him off too. This is ridiculous. It's the longest tenured Sudbury guy I've ever seen. Oh my god, that's hilarious. Finally a point game player after all these years. Holy shit. 25 years old and just living the life. Doesn't even have him as an OA if you look at their ages. OA, and doesn't show him as the third, so something's broken in the game. I think that's kind of funny though. But anyways, that's it for this episode. I will make another episode probably before the playoffs. We'll kind of skim through these last 2 months. There's not a lot of changes yet to do after the World Juniors because they don't really leave for tournaments or anything, and depth chart usually kind of pretty set this time of the year. So I will probably sim a couple months pretty fast since my internet's actually broken. I don't have any internet for until tomorrow. I have to call them. I think I forgot to pay my bill and they cut it after. My company doesn't give any leeway. It's like if you miss the due date, we'll cut it right away. So I got to do that. But I'll be playing this all night and probably go right to the playoffs tonight and make another episode. So see you later.